Success Mantra is a program which features people, successful individuals from various walks of life. They are less known heroes who believe in their dreams and have conviction to live their full potential. Idols, icons, innovators who care to live every moment on their own terms. Welcome to another edition of Success Mantra. As always, today we have our interesting guest with us, Mr. Vidya Shankar. And he comes with a plethora of experience and different exposure that he has got not only as an IS, but as an advisor and board member of many universities and incubators. So let's hear from him. First of all, welcome to the show, Mr. Vidya Shankar. We are delighted to have you here.
So pleasure is mine. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we go ahead, why don't you tell us how the journey has been, and when you look back, what are some of the cherished roles that you have played in society?
In the service?
Yeah.
Or before that or after that?
Both, in fact, whatever comes to your mind first.
Okay. Well, did my entire schooling in Delhi because my father was working in Delhi. Then did my economics honors from Shri Ram College, Delhi. After did my master's in economics from the Delhi School of Economics. Also did MPhil from the Delhi School of Economics. Joined the service in 82. Had 33 plus years of tenure in government. Had a couple of stints in Government of India. I was working in the Department of Personnel and Administrative Reforms for 4 years and a half. Then went to Harvard, got a degree from Harvard University, returned. I was also working with I was on deputation with the Election Commission of India for a couple of years, did 2 elections, 1 state assembly and 1 Lok Sabha. Thereafter had a long stint in tech-based departments, especially the Department of E-Governance, Department of Information Technology, Biotechnology, Science and Technology. Then I superannuated as Additional Chief Secretary to Government of Karnataka in the Department of Commerce and Industries. Now, immediately after my superannuation, I had a very brief stint with an ADB assisted project. That was for about 6 months' time. Then May 2014, the year I superannuated, I joined the India Electronics and Semiconductor Association, which is equivalent to what NASSCOM is. NASSCOM is for software services and software products. Now, India Electronics and Semiconductor Association is a national trade and business body representing electronics and semiconductor companies. We had close to about 200 plus electronics and semiconductor companies as our members spread throughout the country. So I was there with them till September of 2017, beginning May 2014. Thereafter, I quit in September, and then I joined a Taiwanese company. I'm sure it was Wistron. They make iPhone or Apple and many other electronic products. I was with them for 1 year. Then I joined another Taiwanese company. I was in Wistron for a year, 2017. Then I'm still with the Taiwanese company, another Taiwanese company that's called Century Development Corporation. I've been with them since 2018. Contract should be coming to an end, hopefully, in August 31st of 2021. Wow. But I'm concurrently working for a number of educational institutions. I'm chairman for Dayanand Sagar Entrepreneurship Research and Business Incubation, which is one of the best incubators in the country as per the industry norms. I'm continuing there. I'm also chairman of Siddhganga Technology Business Incubator in Tumkur, which is about 70 kilometers from Bangalore.
Wow.
Also working as an advisor to Toyota Engines in Bangalore. Also chairman of a couple of ethics committee. Every hospital and a medical and research institute has to have an ethics committee. So currently I'm chairman of one ethics committee in Bangalore.
Wow.
So that's very much in brief of what I'm currently doing.
Wow. So, how do you juggle so many responsibilities and roles? Is it your experience in services which helps you kind of manage and juggle these responsibilities?
See, most of these organizations that I'm currently working for, they are all need. They are not 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 kind of a job.
Right.
So my presence is required only whenever they think that my inputs are required.
Sure.
Though it's intensive with a couple of organizations, but otherwise, it's all need based. So one
Sure.
can do it online or maybe a couple of visits a week. So I think it's possible to manage with these organizations without any hassle.
Nice. Very nice. So, going back to your experience in services, first of all, after your economics, masters and everything, why did you decide to go into services, becoming an IS rather than, you could have done so many other things coming out of an organization, like university like that. So, any specific reason why you opted for services?
My grandfather was in the service.
Ah,
Because
okay.
the motivation, number one.
Mhm.
And number two, being a product of the Delhi School of Economics, every year out of 80 to 100 students who get enrolled in MA Economics, see, every year about 15 to 20 get into the service.
Oh,
So,
is it? Okay.
I mean, that was the case when I graduated.
Okay.
My own batch, more than 7 people got, absorbed in the very first year of their appearance. So, some sort of an ATM slot, you put the coin, you come out of it.
Right.
That was a kind of culture in Delhi school.
Nice.
Time, science and engineering had not picked up to the extent they have picked up now.
Right.
So liberal arts and associated disciplines were still doing very well.
True.
So, the moment you come out of Delhi school, the first thing people do is appear for the civil services.
Civil services. Yeah. Okay.
That was normally the case. And, as I said, my grandfather was also in the service. So there was some incentive, some motivation to get into the service once again.
Right. Wonderful. And, apart from your great education with Delhi School of Economics, what is the kind of personality you would suggest one should have if one is aiming for civil services? What kind of personality can thrive in a role like this?
See, right now, the private sector is a very major part of our economy, which was not the case in late 60s, early 70s, almost till the late 70s and early 80s. Now, it's very important. So private sector is definitely more attractive. But the thing is, if you want to get into civil service, most important thing is you must have a passion for work. I mean, it cannot be for the buck in a government service,
Right.
The passion for public service is very important, number one. And you must be ready to serve in all parts of the country.
Right.
I worked in 33 years plus of my service. I worked in, I don't know, about 16 or 17 different locations.
Wow.
So it does, challenge you in terms of working in different environments with a different ambience. So number one, most important is you must have a passion for public service. And second, don't compare yourself with the private sector because the private sector culture is very different. Though right now I'm in the private sector, post my superannuation, but it's very important for us to have this very laser focus in serving the general public. That was what motivated me to a large extent. And number two, there's a lot of expectation from the people also because they look at government in a different way altogether. So if one has a passion for service, a commitment for service, I think that's very important. Without that, it will be very, very difficult.
Sure. And what about managing the political leaders and, managing that entire spectrum, which is also a part of the administrative services, right?
I personally feel, it's not a challenge at all. You see, if you are doing something good for the public, see, that's good. vote catcher for the people's representative also.
Yeah, yeah.
So just to give you one example, of
Mm.
course I have, I'll just give you one example.
Mm.
Uh, you know, I was quite tech savvy in all my postings. Wherever I got posted, I ensured that technology penetration is ensured to the maximum, almost to
Mm.
the hilt.
Right.
One of the complaints which I got when I was both in IT and I was also chairman of Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board,
Mm-hmm.
people used to tell me that, I had to apply for casual leave to pay my water bill, to pay my telephone bill, to pay my electricity bill, to pay school fees to my child or my children. Imagine applying for a casual leave or, going on a holiday only for these purposes. So we were among the first in the country, Bangalore being a very tech savvy city also, we were
Mm-hmm.
in the country to start something called Bangalore One,
Right.
where
Mm.
yeah, we not only uh, permitted people to avail all the services in one window,
Mm.
not only services, but private
Mm.
services. You could book
Right.
your airline tickets, you could book your, n number of other services of the public sector and the private sector
Mm-hmm.
routed through open 24/7. That was the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of it. I
Right.
did not stand in a queue. Nobody stands in a queue today for more than 5 minutes in any Bangalore One outfit.
Right.
So started Bangalore One. There was, I'm sure the first thing you will come across is, was there any opposition to it by the local people's representatives? In fact, there were none. You know why? Primarily because, you are closing down all the counters of all these utilities because they are no more
Mm-hmm.
required. When you
Right.
are starting a single window portal, there
Mm-hmm.
is no necessity of an electricity board or a water board or a telephone exchange to run their cash counters also. Because, in 5 minutes time, I can deposit all my bills in one go and then come out of it. So once you close the cash counters of all these independent utilities, you
Mm-hmm.
normally come across sort of an opposition from those respective organizations.
Sure.
The political organization, they said that, this is what the people require because it was a vote catcher for them also.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I have a number of such initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
which I personally did not encounter any challenge, to be very frank,
Mm-hmm.
primarily because, you know, it was, it was giving them political mileage also.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
reducing the people's, hardships and going from one counter to another counter and applying for leave, it was
Mm-hmm.
something which was very much, of course, I'm only giving you one example. There are very
Mm-hmm.
many examples, other examples where, in fact, I started getting pressure.
Mm.
We had, currently we have about 110 Bangalore One centers in Bangalore. See,
Right.
some political representatives came and asked me,
Mm.
why only Bangalore? Karnataka has 30 districts. Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
have it? So we
Across all
started
districts.
Karnataka One.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that was, yeah, identical to what we have in Bangalore. We
Mm.
had it in other districts also.
Mm.
So, change that. Right now, for example, I'm sure that's the case throughout the country. As soon as your 10th standard and 12th standard examinations are announced,
Mm-hmm.
there's a long queue for revaluation of papers,
Right.
right?
Mm.
You have a mile long queue. Even that is routed through Bangalore One and Karnataka One now because they know that
Wow.
it's hassle free and
True.
deposit the required fee and you can come any time of the day, any time of the
Mm-hmm.
night and avail your services. And you also get the results in whatever time is required.
Awesome. Awesome. And
Second,
right. Do you find any parallels, or is there a lot of difference between the culture that you had as a civil services person versus the private sector that you're serving today?
of course, yeah. Because, in public sector, see, whenever you take a decision, there are
Mm-hmm.
choices available. One is
Right.
outcome based or
Mm.
it is process based.
True.
Government, it is process based. You have to follow a particular process.
Mm.
Uh, Suppose you want to buy something, you want to acquire something, you have to go through an e-procurement tender, ensure that you are compliant with both L1 and T1 requirements and so on. Because,
Mm-hmm.
after all, it's money and you are accountable to it. Whereas in private, it is outcome based.
Right.
Even even if you are in a position where you have to pay X percentage more for a particular product because it's superior or qualitatively better, you are
Right.
in a position to make that decision. So the process is quite different. One is outcome based, second is process based.
Okay. And, do you think we should change in the, civil services sector, as in, the way some people talk about the red tapeism and all these processes, which delays the, entire outcome and so on and so forth. So is there any change that can be brought about from the private sector and some practices which can be incorporated in the government? A lot is happening already, but how do you think more changes can be adopted faster?
See, in my view, that's why I came out with those first two conditions. You must be passionate about your work.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You must be committed to serve the people. I used to get on an average about 100 to 125 mails every day.
Wow.
And every mail used to be answered within 2 hours of response. That was my condition. We were more efficient than the private sector in some cases. Okay.
Sure.
So unless you have that commitment to ensure that government gets a good name, it'll be, it's just like any other job for you.
True.
So even today, I have close to about 150 to 200 mails every day. And I respond to most of them. And I don't have a PA. I do it on my own.
Wow. That really calls for an applause. Wow. You respond all the emails by yourself.
I'll tell you the reason. After the pandemic in the early 2020, I have not been as required. So everything is at home.
Right.
So also don't trouble my personal section primarily because, they also have a lot of things to do on their own, looking after family and so on and so forth. So I thought, why? If they come to office, it's okay. But when they are not coming to office and when they are not required to come to office, it's better to go hands-on. So even now, all the mails.
Awesome. Fantastic. I was always very curious about the fact that the country requires passionate people who want to serve the people. And that's something which is very clear. Then why is the exam so difficult and the process so rigorous, and it's so much of heartbreak and so many stories involved with it in terms of getting through civil services?
See, some more people think that, there are two angles to it. One is the passion to do public work. Second, people, the other angle, which at least I don't patronize it. They say you have a lot of power over you. I mean, that's not power automatically when you have that passion, you don't have to bother with power. People normally think that, if you see some of the earlier gazetteers published immediately before India became independent, I had an occasion to read one of them. It's very unfortunate that it has been written like that. Is that the sun rises only when the district wants. The district magistrate and the sun rise together.
Right.
It's a bit of an exaggeration. That gives a very wrong picture to the aspirants. That if the focus is on how best we can try to solve the kinds of problems that the kinds of issues that people currently have, and you make all the difference to the lives of the people, and it's genuinely possible. I personally believe in it.
Right. So it's interesting, we had Spider-Man say that with great power comes great responsibility. But you make a great point. With great passion, power is automatically there.
Yeah. And you forget about power. You're passionate about it, no? Power is not in your radar at all. Care of it.
Awesome.
You have no time to think of the kind of power that you exercise.
This is a great point that you make, that when you have passion for something, then the power is forgotten. You're just immersed in the process.
Absolutely. Beautiful. No doubt about it. Check with many of the civil servants who are even currently in service. They will give you a similar response to why they opted for the service, why they are continuing in the service.
Beautiful. Excellent.
So, like one of the things that we see in civil services is a lot of people aspire, only a few make. Of course, the process is very rigorous. So, when do you recommend that a person starts if they have to really kind of, get into the, uh, get this through in their career?
I mean, in my view, post-graduation will help you. I'm not saying that as an undergraduate degree, you are not likely to get through. There are lots and lots of them who get through immediately after undergraduate courses also. But, post-graduation definitely helps you to, do a little bit of deep dive in the domain in which you are working. That helps you. And number one. And number two, people try to categorize as subjects which are doing very well and subjects
that was
not
my
doing.
next question.
That is a total misconception. If you are good in a subject, irrespective of whether it is good or bad or in terms of the total marks that you score, I mean, you're going to come out success, no doubt about it.
Okay, so science or arts really doesn't matter much?
No, it doesn't matter at all. Absolutely no. You can score as well, irrespective of the kind of discipline that you chose, so long as you are good in the domain that you are specializing in.
Right, still right. In education, which ensures that, it's like the cookie cutter process, right? You put into the system and automatically you get the best product out. How can we make the government schools more like the public schools and every child to get an opportunity to be their best?
I think that will take definitely some time. NEP, the NEP that we have currently, which has been put in position, does answer a lot of these questions. It encourages a lot of private universities, which is, much required, because we need to partner with the best of brains in the world and the best of institutions in the world. And the NEP provides a very good opening to these kinds of initiatives, especially in promoting private universities. Of late, you do see a lot of IITs coming up, a lot of triple IITs coming up. And, I think they are the ones which are going to change the scenario. As I said, there is a lot of requirement of manpower. In fact, there are companies, I don't want to name the companies, which say that if only I get the required manpower with the required, background in terms of their ability, with the required skill sets, I can 3x or 4x. So there is definitely a shortage of manpower, because we are in a new era of skills.
Sure.
Where, and people are talking of AI, ML, language processing, NLPs, and liberal. Bombay IIT has come out with just about a week ago, liberal arts, science and engineering.
Wow.
Delhi IIT come out with GAIN, which is global grassroots level innovation. GRIP, it's called GRIP, GRIP. Just about a week ago, Delhi IIT announced, these are the things which are going to make, India again among the top-notch suppliers of the required manpower.
If you had to go back and change something in your life, like especially in context to your career and of course your role in the government sector, would you change something or would you keep it as it is?
No, one area where we are not, at least I would say we are not doing as well as we should, is in the manufacturing. Currently we have a lot of opportunity to capitalize. There are a lot of things today. You must have heard of the PLI scheme, Production Linked Incentive, as a part of India. The only thing is, you need to make it, across all the sectors. Today, there are only some sectors which get the benefit of the PLI to ensure manufacturing picks up in a very big way.
Sure.
A lot of companies are leaving a particular country. I don't have to name the country. You know it as well as I do. Now, capitalize and ensure that they come to India and set up a base.
You've had a brilliant kind of career, and I would say you're like Amitabh Bachchan. You're still, even after
Oh,
retirement,
nowhere near that.
you are
Nowhere
kind
near
of
that.
into so many jobs, right? So he is doing it in the film industry. You are doing it in the IT/ITS
No,
as well as
I'm
the
nowhere
manufacturing
near.
sector.
I'm just scratching the surface. Just scratching the.
Yeah. So, tell us something in terms of what does success really mean to you? Like you have lived your entire life juggling so many things. You're still doing that very successfully. So, in terms of success, what does it look like to you?
I actually don't look at success. As long as one is useful, or I mean, I can't say that I'm useful. Somebody else should say that. So that's what I keep telling my people, saying that you need to be to the not to yourself. You can't be judging yourself useful, but you need to ask the person who's sitting across the counter and ask him whether you are useful. If they find you useful, I think you would have done your job. I don't think we must look at success because success is something which is, not going to be with you throughout. Whereas if you know to be useful to others, I think success automatically comes. I don't say yes to anything that people ask from me. For example, I also get offers saying that why don't you be a part of this? Why don't you be a part of that? If I know that I'll not be able to contribute much, point blank, I tell them, sorry, I have absolutely no time. Number one, not be able to contribute the way you are visualizing. Yes, I will not set those requirements and your demands are, whatever your requests are.
Sure.
So only wherever I think I can contribute, I normally get response. And most of these things pro bono. There are commercials attached to all my assignments. In both the technology business incubators that I'm looking at, both are pro bono initiatives. There are no commercials. There are no business cases involved.
Kudos to you that you're mentoring young entrepreneurs and startups who are kind of working towards it. Awesome. What has been the biggest achievement which you still cherish and you feel that it's given you a lot in life?
Most important thing is, I've to a large extent been in a position to promote technology in governance.
Yes.
People normally find it as a challenge. I would not call it as a challenge. I would call it as an opportunity. I could make use of the opportunity and quite a bit in ensuring perpetration and penetration of technology in this. That the most expensive factory ever built by man in the world, is in Taiwan.
Wow.
Okay. So, yeah. It costs close to about I'm talking about one factory. It's cost about close to 18 to 19 billion US dollars. See, one would have invested 18 to 19 billion dollars in 5 factories, but in one factory, spending 18 to 19 billion dollars is something, you don't come across every day.
What are they manufacturing?
They are manufacturing chips, microprocessors. You must have TSMC. Taiwan manufacturing company. They are the biggest in the world. They supply about 55% of all the chips in the world. So they have set up a factory. So just keep myself abreast of what's happening in the tech space. Otherwise, the highest rate of obsolescence is in the knowledge. Unless you update knowledge in a daily basis. In fact, the degree obtained today, not only in India, anywhere in the world, the life of a degree is only about 4 to 5 years. By that time, so much more of development, so much more of new inputs would have gone into it. So one can't, 40 years ago, a degree ensured a lifetime career. Today, a degree ensures a career for about 4 years or 5 years. That's all. Because we are in the new era of skills where unless we do continuous learning, it's very, very difficult to keep pace with the requirements of the industry and requirements of the society.
Right.
So I just keep pace with what's happening.
Excellent. And have you ever faced any kind of failures in this journey?
Lots of them. Lots of them. Yeah. So
how do you
success
deal with
without
them?
failure.
How do you
You know,
deal with them?
but every failure is a stepping stone to success. You know, every failure, you learn more about what not to do and what to do. They've been for failures, and then, you know, they have taught us a lot. Don't think even the top-notch CEOs that you see or hear about across the world,
Right.
they have had, you know, Steve Jobs was thrown out of the company which he formed. He came back with a bang, and well, the world knows what happened to him. I'm just giving one example. You know, that's the case with everybody. You know, you have more failures and very little success built on those failures. Without failures, it's not possible to have success.
Sure. So, and you know, like through your journey, as a child also, did you always want to become a civil servant, or was there anything else you always
because
wanted
of
to?
grandfather? Because of grandfather. Yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. So thank you so much for making time. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show. And what is this message or mantra that you would like to share with our audience, which you think is going to really support them in their happiness, health, and harmony in life?
Okay, Sonali, suppose I tell you, the country needs more of you. For the country, will you be encouraged?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't it? You know, that's what we want to say. Every individual has a role to play in the country's development. So if I can tell people that the country wants more of you, more people like you or more of you, I think that's one great encouragement that you can help people with getting the right kind of motivation.
Wow. I think you couldn't have said anything better, because, you know, a lot of times we just don't value our contribution and what we are doing. So the very fact that, you know, somebody says, or you tell yourself that what I am doing is important, whether you are, you know, like a person serving tea, or whether you are, you know, in the restaurant or in any other industry. It's not just IT, it's any industry that you are in, you can make a big difference. Wow, very well said. Thank you so much, and we look forward to interact more with you.
Thank you, Sonali. Great talking to you. Have a super day.